Dirt, think again. Beneath our feet lies a whole ecosystem of predatory mites, springtails, and worms that help with cannabis cultivation. But not only that, we're going to dive into beneficials and more with My Beneficials. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Organically Blunt. I am Jay Blaze, your host, and this evening I have the pleasure and the opportunity to speak with Mark from My Beneficials. Welcome to the Organically Blunt Show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Jay.
Definitely. So I want to dive right into things with you. We're going to dive into your personal journey to start things off a little bit. What led you to beneficial bugs and regenerative agriculture?
So I started growing cannabis probably 15 years ago in Southern California. And I was in the desert, had its host of issues, had my host of pest problems, and didn't really know what I was doing, but was greatly empowered by my successes at kind of just winging it, and just kind of dealing with the pests as they come. And one of the biggest issues I dealt with that grow was greenhorn worms. And so that is what kind of started me, 15 years ago, getting interested in bioinsecticides, biocontrols, stuff like that, learning about things like BT Kerstaki, which takes care of those worms. And it wasn't until years later, because of just the way my career was, I started getting drug tested a lot. I also didn't own houses at the time, so I didn't really. I went from having a really good spot to grow to having nowhere to grow, being in a prohibition state, all that fun stuff. So it wasn't until about 7 years ago when I moved to Michigan and was able to legally grow again that I really got reconnected. And it started with growing, no-till, as you would call it, indoors. And no-till inherently follows a regenerative cycle. If you're doing it right, it should be a somewhat regenerative process. Granted, it's closed loop, so you're always going to have to bring some inputs in from outside. But for the most part, you can mitigate your inputs by reusing things from the grow, like your chop and drop and stuff like that, which truly is regenerative. So, getting into the regenerative side of things, growing no-till indoors, and like a lot of people, started dealing with fungus gnats. And I started to do research and find, there's quite a few prescriptions for the issue, and a lot of those prescriptions include spraying product on the soil. And then what ends up happening is you start seeing other issues with your plants, because all of a sudden you start spraying these caustic things on the soil. You think it's working because the fungus gnats might get knocked back a little bit, right? All of a sudden you start seeing issues with the plants, and you're messing up the biology in the soil by going that route. And then the unfortunate thing that ends up happening always regardless is that the gnats come back. So that's what really, having gnats in the kitchen upstairs, I'm growing in the basement. My wife's going, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm questioning myself as a gardener, because if I have gnats upstairs, I mean, like this looks like a shit show, So, right. So that's when I really started to do some kind of research and some digging on other options that might actually work. And so the first thing I did was I stopped spraying these things because my plants were getting messed up, and I was chasing my tail, trying to change water, trying to do this, do that. And it really was just the products that I was using to try to attack fungus gnats, which really, in my opinion, aren't even as big of an issue as poisoning your plants are. So I found rove beetles, right? It really wasn't like a huge point of conversation. It really still isn't. It, for whatever reason, people don't want to talk about rove beetles as an option. We can get into that later. But rove beetles and hypoaspis miles, which are predatory mites, and those two in conjunction will attack fungus gnat larvae. And so I started off immediately by throwing them in my worm bin, because I had too big of a grow where I wasn't going to spend several $100s on this potential snake oil option, right? So I decided to go cheap. I went with like the $150 smallest batch of both of those bugs that I could possibly find. I decided to inoculate my worm bins to see if I could get those populations up. And so what I found was that a worm bin's like a really good place for those types of predatories. And so if you can run a successful worm bin and you can get the right species in that worm bin, you can successfully set up a kind of like an IPM worm bin. So seeing like really quick results after I started inoculating my pots with these worm castings, right? Within several weeks, I was seeing the nets completely gone. Within a couple weeks, seeing a pretty good drop back. And then within like 2 months, it's just kind of like a thing of the past, and you start seeing these things actually populating in the soil. And so those two predatory species that are in the soil lend themselves again to regenerative, because they are regenerative. Their population keeps coming back over and over. So that's where it all started for me. Then I got linked up. I've always been interested in like predatory mites and stuff like that. And I got linked up with a great supplier out of California who's raising them in United States, which is actually a rarity. And so, yeah, we have a lot of offerings when it comes to beneficial insects at MI Beneficials. And we also, with your purchase and even without the purchase, most of the time, when we have the time, and we usually do, we'll get back to you with free consultation. You tell us what you have. If you could send us pictures, we can get back to you, because we do enjoy this stuff, and we like helping people out. So
Definitely.
Sorry that was so long-winded.
No, that's good. That's good, man. It's your story, and you don't want to cut out the details. So I've been in the same boat, with a lot of different bugs. My biggest thing this season was leaf septoria, and I had platoplasma, or however you say it. I'm not good at pronouncing it, but basically one of my plants started turning purple, and these were different things I dealt with in this season. Every season's different, and you got to learn to battle things. And a lot of these people that are newer growers in our community, they might not know the true organic way to using beneficial bugs and predator mites to combat other problems they have. So that's why I'm glad you're on here, because this kind of knowledge is very useful for everybody.
Totally, yeah, no, and it's the knowing how to fight the battle is really important. And the reason why I thought that the product that I sell is like a collection. I didn't even get to mention that it's a collection of those two predatory species, and then things like springtails, orbited mites, decomposing species. I guess the reason why, like right off the clip, I like to talk about those is because good pest management starts in the soil. Good pathogen management starts in the soil. It also equates to good like environmentals and air movement, airflow, all that fun stuff. But good pest management good IPM starts in the soil.
Absolutely. So a weird question we had from one of our readers here, and I kind of reworded it, but can you share how exotic springtails, became a central part of your garden and your work? And is there a difference between an exotic and a standard?
When we're talking about springtails,
Yes.
so they're all gonna be from the same. It's funny because for marketing purposes, sure. Absolutely. From like a location where they're harvested, where they originated from, I would say, yeah, okay, exotic, because like there's red springtails that we carry that originate out of Thailand. There's orange ones that originate out of Spain,
Wow.
that are not domestic species. There's also orange ones that are originated out of Florida. And I've seen personally green springtails in my backyard. I haven't, but the key with all of that is being able to collect them in the wild, bring them into an isolated culture, rear them with success, and then be able to I guess bring them to sale. So I haven't delved that far into it. But they all originate, the ones that are for sale, the ones that we carry, the ones that are for sale, generally speaking, are going to come from the same Collembola family, right? So you will see like a standard white springtail in healthy soils. But if you look really closely, you'll see different colored springtails too. There'll be grays and blues and hard to see dark ones as well if you really look at your healthy soil. What you're not going to see though in like our soils here in Michigan is like oranges, reds, yellows. Those are generally going to be a warmer species, which is correlated to exotic. But they're also like those orange ones are ferocious eaters, and they love a protein heavy diet, right? So they'll eat your fish meals, your crab meals. They'll go after
Oh,
like
wow.
so. Yeah,
Definitely.
great to have.
Brandon wants to talk about some plant health, and that's that's absolutely what the next question I was going to dive into with you here. How do you balance introducing like new amendments without messing with the microbes or the bugs? Is there like a safe, I guess, practice or way you do it? I guess you'd put it.
Yeah, I mean, like as long as you keep it organic, right? Like as long as you're using amendments that are going to be something you're going to be using in your garden, outdoors. Um, I wouldn't really worry about dusts. I wouldn't worry about any of that kind of stuff. I wouldn't go applying like diatomaceous earth or anything like that. But just remember that like those amendments that you're putting down, you're feeding the organisms and the microorganisms in the soil. So that's actually their food. So I would even consider like going a step further and considering amendments that might actually feed those organisms. Um, and one of those would be like barley. Sprouted barley is amazing. Malted barley, if you want to go spend a little more money. Wheat bran, which like you can also do bokashi, uh, corn, stuff like that. Grinding that up into a pulp and then like spreading that down. We sell our products called Benny Boost, and I call it that because that's literally what we feed our cultures with. So yeah, I would uh, I would say that really anything organic is not going to hurt them.
Okay, definitely. So, that leads me to the next question, is there certain ways like these have to be stored before you introduce them to your garden?
So if we're talking about like the biodiversity, really any of them, right?
Yep.
The springtails that we sell, there's been a lot more gardeners using these, getting them into their living soil beds. And there's certain species that I feel like will really enhance the nutrient cycle and help break things down. But so the springtails that we sell, they come in airtight containers that you can leave like that for, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They will start to deplete in populations, depending on the species. Some come on clay, some come on soil substrate. So at the expense of getting like too technical with it, I would really like introduce those within a week or so. And the same thing with those biodiversity packs. I wouldn't order them too early and expect them to like expand in population in those packs after we pack them. And because what we've found is that they will, if you keep them shelved, the reason you're not going to like find them at grocery stores on the shelves or anything like that, we've tried all that. They don't shelf for longer than like a couple weeks. And ideally, you're putting these in right away. So plan on putting them in as soon as you can for the best results, because like it's remember, it's an inoculation, right? We're putting in like a relatively, it's not like, it's a good amount of bugs, but it's a relatively to the size volume you have, a small amount, so you want it to grow in, so the quicker it gets in, the quicker it takes off.
Absolutely. So, what is a lot of the mistakes that most people make when introducing these that maybe they can avoid with some of your advice here today?
Oh, that's a good question. So one of the biggest mistakes is not running a mulch layer.
Okay.
So if you're not running a mulch layer, you're not giving these guys a good habitat to live in. But you're also, if you listen to guys that have been doing no-till a long time, you'll find, and the ones that have longevity in those beds are the ones that are running a thick top layer of organic matter, that every leaf coming off is going down into the bed, mimicking nature. And it just lends itself to the whole process. But from a bug standpoint, it provides the best habitat for breeding, because they can cruise the top of the rhizosphere, which is where they want to hang, that top couple inches, and they can just go crazy, having orgies and feasting and, having a blast.
That's so cool. Definitely. Yeah, we're getting ready to put together our next series for 2025. We're going to be introducing, just a 4x2 auto growth tent with a living soil bed. But we're going to automate everything. We're going to try to keep it as much hands off as possible, but with living soil. And I mean, it's going to be difficult, but obviously you got to keep an eye on things and everything like that. But I feel like it's going to be good. And we're going to hopefully teach some people how to do this at home. I'm trying to make it as user friendly as possible. And being that we are organically here, we want to stay organic as possible when it comes to anything we put into the bed. And that's another reason I kind of wanted to get you on the show, is because I honestly don't know bugs like you guys do. And I want to make sure I'm using the right stuff and I'm not buying from, you know, Amazon and getting something that isn't even what I need. I want to know there's a source to go to with somebody that I can speak with that has the knowledge on the subject, such as yourself. And that's great because people can connect with you over on your website or through Instagram and get the answers they're looking for.
Yeah, there are a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of snake oil out there. And that's, inherently the uphill battle when it comes to biocontrols, is that there is a difference between a good biocontrol and a not good biocontrol. It's not always apples to apples. And then, there's certain bugs that just don't succeed. They just will not do well indoors. They
Okay.
need natural circadian rhythm. They need natural environment, of outdoor. So it is snake oil to be sold into indoor growers. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And more not, I'm not taking shots at anybody specifically, but things like ladybugs, green lacewings, those are species that you're not going to find a lot of growers having a ton of success with those, handling whatever it is they're trying to handle, whether it be aphids or whatever. And the reason is they fly into the lights, they fly into the fans, they die, they just literally just die, and they're not getting a natural outdoor environment that they're used to. So there's other reasons as well, just like the way that ladybugs get harvested, but we don't need to get into that. They just simply don't work, and it's not worth the investment.
That's good to know because that's honestly, we asked everybody what their favorite was in their gardens. And most of the results we got were ladybugs, and I was like, you know, a lot of people do jump for that, me included. You know,
But outdoors, like don't, and please don't get me wrong on this.
right,
Outdoors, but I'm not buying ladybugs for outdoors. What I'm doing is I'm building a habitat that ladybugs come to. It you and you, like you release ladybugs outdoor. If you didn't build the habitat already, they're gone. They're going to
yeah.
that. They're going to go find the habitat. They're going to have a great life without you.
Oh
But
yeah, we
you know,
released 5,000 once, and I think I came back 3 days later, and I didn't even find a single one, and I was like, uh, well, there goes that, and
yeah. Well, and you'll notice if you really look close and at what we have here naturally nowadays. Sadly, what you find on the like what I find in my garden here in Southwest Michigan is it's not a native lady beetle. It's an Asian ladybird beetle, but they're a ferocious predator of aphids. So that's the other thing, right? If you don't have aphids, they don't have anything to eat. They're going to move
right.
on. That's why you don't necessarily want 5,000 of them hanging out on your plants, because they're not going to have enough to eat either. And like Mad Dog said, you're right, Mad Dog. It's the larva that you want. So that's the stuff that I'm looking for in my garden. Is
Definitely.
I'm looking on the bottom sides of these for those little black, crazy looking things that don't look anything like a ladybug. And I try to share pictures like as I'm going through it in the summer and stuff like that on Instagram. So people are like, oh, yeah, I see that all the time. And you let those guys go, they're ferocious.
Oh, I bet, definitely. You know, the one thing I joke about with a lot of people I talk to about bugs and using them, a lot of my buddies use praying mantises, and they're like, "Why won't you use them?" And I'm like, "Well, the one time I used one, it jumped on me, and I freaked the fuck out, and so I haven't used them in my garden since. I mean, if they're there naturally outdoors, that's them, but indoors, not my thing, honestly."
Yeah, they're harmless.
Yeah, I know. It's just the thought of, oh, I don't know. That's the one I don't like. But, so other than them kind of bugs, what other kind of beneficials do you guys work with that might not be commonly heard of?
So it's kind of a really weird time because in the last 2 days, I just heard from my supplier, the owner of the company out in California that we've been carrying, and they're not going to be able to keep their doors open. Unfortunately, they're going out of business. So they're one of the last United States-based insectaries, and so we were carrying literally up until like yesterday, Californicus, uh, Phalacis, and Occidentalis mites, which are three different generalist predatory mites against spider mites, right? And so you pick those based off of what your grow environment is, your temperature and humidity swings, what your high highs and your low lows are, and all these. It's not that complicated, but based on that parameter, you use one of those three mites, and then based on how many spider mites you have, using a good estimation, you apply that many predatory mites. So those three species of mites, and then the other one would be like a Persimilis. Um, those four predatory mites. Persimilis is going to be more of a specific. It is a specific predator against only the two-spotted spider mite. So knowing what your pest is kind of important, and that's why it's important to reach out to people. And even though we don't carry these things anymore, I can still help try to steer people in the right direction. It's just
Absolutely.
the thing I will say is it's hard for me to tell anybody where to get these things at this point, because though you when you buy predators like those, and when you buy predators in general, the time that it takes in transit to get them to you is really important. And the part that you don't see and hear about is the fact that a lot of these predatory mites get packed and shipped out of Europe, and they get sent on like a 3 or 4 day ship cycle. So by the time they get to you, it's been 5-6 days. They're having died off in the droves. You know, you order 100,000 or whatever, you're going to get 10% viability. And then there's just other things. I could talk about that one for a long time, which is why it's crushing that I lost this supplier and that I don't really know where to get these anymore, because I don't know where to get the effective ones. And I couldn't tell people like, hey, you need this many to handle this problem. You know, we were able to do that with this company with 100% like basically satisfaction. And so, yeah, support local, guys. I guess that's the point of that story.
Absolutely. You know, when you do, 80% of the funds that you spend locally with a small business stay right in that community. And that's why I'm using a lot of the smaller guys now. You know, I started out working with some of the bigger companies, even with soil. And, you know, it's not that I have anything against them, but I go to my man Country Roots here, right here in Michigan. Not only is it brewed and mixed here in Michigan, but I know his family. I know where the money's coming. Yep. And I know it's putting food on his table. Where if you're using something, I won't say any names, but you're using one of the big names, it's not going in. It's split up so many ways that by the end of the product, the profit's really only going to the one person. And it's
yeah, that's one consideration, you know. And then just the logistics, the shipping. That's what's crushing too, is like selling those predatory mites. I never got. We tried to always have free shipping. It's just not possible because we have to have these expensive heating and cooling measures in the summer and then in the winter to ensure that these things get to you alive. So I can't offer that anymore. And so with the Predator, but I still offer like it's like $10 or $12 shipping, so it's super reasonable shipping. But then when you switch over to the predatory mites, the shipping's $85.
Whoa!
And it's because it has to go priority overnight. You know, it has to be delivered before the heat of the sun at noon comes up. It gets sent in a pharmaceutical grade box with ice packs and everything else. And then the cost of like the American raised predators is just more because they're raising them on actual spider mite eggs, which the whole process in a lab setting is just a heavy cost on overhead. So that's not, it's like, you know, it's very tough business. I do feel for those guys, for the small companies around that are trying to compete and ship these things. And thankfully our packs are small because we wouldn't be able to compete if we were selling soil.
Right. Well, and you make it so it's user friendly for the home grower or the commercial grower or anything in between. I mean, and that makes it great because not only can you use bugs just for cannabis, I'm sure you can use it in other forms of gardening as well, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they use predatories across a wide variety, and a lot of fruits, nuts, vegetables out west, specifically where they're able to get these populations natively regenerating because they have that nice climate out there.
Absolutely. So I want to ask a couple fun questions before we dive into just the personal story of you as a person. And that is, you know, what's the most unusual bug or amendment you worked with and what made it so special?
I'm starting. So we literally just did an interview with the owner of Terraganics yesterday, and they own like the proprietary product EM1, right? And it's effective microorganisms is what it is, and it's a combination of these three symbiotic things, these three symbiotic living fungi and bacteria, which are lactobacillus, which we all know as labs. Or sorry, I don't mean to be, I don't mean to talk down. Labs you might have heard of, or lactobacillus. Then it's got yeast, like you would find in like kombucha or beer or whatever. And then the third thing, which is really important, is purple non-sulfur bacteria. And those three things right there act as like the leadership team for your native indigenous microorganisms. So if your soil is suffering, especially like outdoor, if you're looking to like rehabilitate lands, or once you're at a good spot with your land, you can also use it to cut significant costs on like nitrogen inputs, and organic matter and all that stuff. And so I would say that like right now, like EM is probably the most fascinating just for what it can possibly do. It goes beyond soil too. It can remediate waterways. It can significantly improve like ponds, right? You got a koi pond, you integrate EM into that, it starts loosening up the algae on your pond pumps. It starts clearing up the water. You can see your fish.
Wow.
It improves the fish life. You know what I mean? So it's this amazing consortia of like rare. It's just like this rare symbiotic relationship of these very powerful microorganisms. So I have a lot to learn about it. I've just like really started using it heavily, and I'm seeing great results in like all my house plants right now. I can't wait to use it next year, especially outside.
It sounds really cool, and
Yeah.
I've never heard of purple sulfur, like you said, but I've seen, at least from the scientific side of things, I've seen white sulfur and I've seen black sulfur, and I think I've seen red sulfur, but I've never seen purple.
Well, I saw you interviewed Matt Powers
Yep.
a
Yep.
while ago, and he's a genius.
Oh
And
yeah.
he actually, in one of his books, it's regenerative soil microscopy. I have it somewhere around here. I can't spot
I
it.
got a digital copy of it, and I dig
Yeah.
around in it.
Yeah, if you look in the back of that, you'll find it's called something else though. But PNSB is what you'll see it referred to as, and it starts with an R, and I cannot remember. If somebody wants to type it out in the comments, it's like Risudo, something like that. But
Okay.
anyways, I'm not gonna try
Yeah.
to
Yep.
spitball that one.
So, last fun question about beneficials and predator bugs and stuff like that. If you could pick one and give it any super type power you wanted it to have, what would you do? And what one would you pick?
I'd have them clean up dog poop, the
All right.
springtails, so you could inoculate your lawn, and then they would clean up your dog poop.
Hey, that's different. Definitely.
Yeah, but now you know what I mean. But now you got to buy enough red springtails for the whole yard, and it's this big thing. Yeah, it's like but they reproduce, right? So they're again regenerative, and so it doesn't. I just think it's fascinating to what they can possibly do, because springtails they clean up, like, so in it there's people in a different realm, right, like a parallel universe to living soil growers, and they're called bioactive reptile owners, or if you're a reptile owner, you call them bioactive enclosures, terrarium, vivarium, whatever you want to call them. You incorporate like living animals, living plants, and living organisms and living soil. And instead of going for like these healthy plants, right, you're going for healthier animals, right? So you're mimicking your reptiles' native environment. When they defecate into the soil, the springtails, the isopods, the organisms in the soil are going to clean up after it, so it doesn't smell in your house. So
Right.
now all of a sudden it starts translating across the board, kind of like in this amazing way of like seeing nature just the way it works. And so I got incorporated into that whole world because they deal with fungus gnats too, if you can imagine. And I Brian from Rubber Ducky Isopods has been using these for 2 years now, and with great success on a commercial level, rearing his isopods. So when people from the isopod world ask, like, are these going to hurt anything? It's like, well, he's been using them for like 2 years, actually. Like, it's a long time, man.
Absolutely.
And a lot of bins, a lot of bins.
I can imagine. So, like I said, I want to dive into a little bit about you just as a person and how the plant has influenced your life, but we got to take it all the way back. And I'm talking, when was the first time you tried cannabis and where'd you get it from?
Oh man, it was like probably 14 years old. I lived next to an elementary school. It was in the parking lot, and I think that I feel like I had tried it before, but that's the first time it actually worked. That she actually took. And yeah, it came just from a friend, and my relationship was that it was extremely elusive. This was in New York, so
Oh, wow.
we were way, way, way behind the times in Michigan, even.
Yep.
And yeah, if you could even find it, you had no idea what it was, what quality. I didn't know what quality was, you know. So yeah, that's kind of how it all began for me. And yeah, just experiencing the effects of the different types, and like you get some fire, and holy shit, you're sleeping for the weekend. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I got a funny similar story. I'm just going to share a tidbit of real quick, but same thing with quality. When I first started smoking, before I even started growing, I didn't know anything. Well, my brother, he lives in South Carolina, and he's exposed to a lot of different stuff, and he always used to call it up here in Michigan when he lived here. He smoked the loud pack. Well, I always was cheap and smoked what they call the reggies. And my brother introduced me to the loud pack. I tried it for a week or so. I went back to the reggies, and I went to hit it the first time, and it literally tasted like the worst shit I've ever smoked in my life. And I spit it out, and that's when I decided I needed to start growing it myself because I couldn't afford the loud pack back then. And that's kind of where things started for me on quality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, even now, I mean, Jay, you around here in Michigan, right? When it comes to quality, when it comes to weed, flower, or concentrates or anything else, you can get it for, you can get it at the level of like $35 an ounce for flour.
Yeah,
Literally $35 an ounce for flour. You can get 15 carts for $100, a gram carts. You know what I mean? And it's like, wow, amazing. But when you when you go to an event like Country Roots Sungrown, or you go
yep,
to like a gray market event where you have real caregivers involved that are actually making the medicine that they smoke, like you said, where you have to grow it yourself, right? Because I can't afford to smoke the quality shit that I produce.
right,
It's you can get the 15 for 100 at the dispo, or you can still spend $50 a gram for the good, the stuff that really is what I want and what I need, that keeps me
right,
medicated and is clean. It's like that's all I smoke anymore for many different reasons. It just doesn't smell. It works great for me. Um, and also hash don't lie, man. Hash does not lie. Flour, you can get away with a lot of sins there, baby, but not in the hash, dude. When it burns weird, it burns black and fucking nasty, tastes funny on your throat, looks weird, whatever.
definitely.
It does not lie, right? I mean, you agree on that one?
I agree. And speaking of that, hopefully you're coming out to the sun grown because A friend
It's
of
my
mine.
daughter's birthday
Okay.
party's on Saturday. I can't.
All right. Well, I understand, but I'll tell you what, Rascal Farmer, he's a friend of mine on Instagram, and he's a good guy, old school grower. He just made some of the most beautiful temple balls I've ever seen, and he's bringing them. And we don't have a category for that because there's such a small niche of people that know how to perfect it and do it cleanly. And this guy's got it down to a science. And I can't wait to try my first one. I've never tried it, so I know I'm going to be in for a ride.
Yeah, I've noticed a trend kind of going back to the old school.
Yep.
Temple balls is also a good way to go, and like it doesn't wash out great, before you go to press. It's like came out darker, like I had a double sour jack plant that like washed out horribly, but we rolled it into temple balls and they came out awesome.
Awesome. Definitely. Yeah. So, you know, a question I ask everybody, and these guys, it usually gives them the munchies and they get hungry, but hey, I'm sorry, guys. What is your go to munchie when you're high?
I guess right now it's going to be hint of lime Tostitos.
Okay. Can't say I've ever had them. That's definitely different. Yeah. So, you know,
You're missing out, dude.
well, I probably am. I used to be addicted to tortilla chips, but the problem is when I have fake teeth. I'm not even gonna lie to you. And it's not very easy to chew them now when you don't have your real chompers. So you don't get that bite the same way. But I do enjoy them, definitely, And that leads me to my final two questions I have for you. Before I just give you the floor and let you talk about anything you'd like for the last few minutes here, I have to ask the honorary organically blunt question. And this question I leave out from sending to anybody because I want it to be organic. I want you to pop out the first answer that pops in your head. So, with that being said, if you could smoke with anybody dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's a tough one. I guess it would be. I guess it would be my uncle. He was. It turns out he was murdered, but he went
Wow.
missing. He went missing like a couple of decades ago, and it was always this weird. My family had like a tainted view on marijuana because of this whole event that went down. And what ended up happening really was it had nothing to do with marijuana. It had to do with harder drugs, and
Okay.
like cartel and like that level of,
Wow.
you know what I mean? So, and because I don't know, nobody actually really knows, and a lot of this information has come out like from it's like basically all this information coming out post mortem through like my sister who's in this music community. Anyways, I feel like it would be justification to smoke with him and to be able to talk to him, and actually know what actually happened, but B, like, let him know that the torch is carried on, and
Absolutely.
because he's probably the only person in my family who actually I know of that grew marijuana back in like the 80s, 70s, and
Sure.
80s.
Definitely.
Everybody else was very by the book to the law. That's how it always was for me. I always was ostracized heavily for being a user, because it was illegal, because it was wrong. You know what I mean? Like they said it
Yep.
was wrong, so it's wrong. And look at your Uncle Greg. He's dead. So, so,
Wow.
yeah, man. Not to go morbid on that, but yeah. I mean, I think that would be dope.
Definitely. That's the kind of stories that actually are my favorite is the kind like that. Like we had a guy on here. I'm just going to show his book real quick. It's called The Next Run. If you guys like stories like this guy was the biggest, if you can see it here, he was a UC Berkeley student, rise to major 60s pot smuggling. This guy was bringing in 18 tons of marijuana from Mexico inside of boats and stuff when he was 18 years old. I mean, can you imagine the stuff he's seen? You know, like it's just some stories, you know. And I do a lot of photography too. So, you know, like my favorite subjects, people ask me this all the time, and it's not these events, even though they are my favorite. It's barns and lighthouses. And people say, well, why? You imagine how long they've been there, the stories they've seen, the work they held, and just everything as a whole that they've seen. That is why they're my favorite subject. If they could speak, man, it would be amazing. And that's why people like your uncle are legends. And you need to honor that, just like I did with my grandfather by creating this show. And that leads me to my final question for you. Where do you see the future of MI Beneficials in the next 5 years?
I'm really hoping to. So we have a podcast that's kind of like this for you. It was a passion project. And you know, like kind of like the goal on the show and kind of how my company is pivoted is I really want the soil enthusiasts to all come together across hobbies. And I think that one hobby that we can draw a strong parallel and correlation across is, like I was saying before, is that bioactive world, which is bioactive, just like another fancy way of saying living soil in a terrarium. And like the living soil guys, because like in your terrarium, you're still growing plants, right? In living soil, you're growing plants too. And it doesn't always have to be cannabis. You know what I mean? Like to me, the biggest flex these days and where my garden outside is especially going is less plant count, marijuana, less square footage space, and just producing enough that I need to get through the year and not have to, like we were talking about earlier, go out and spend primo dollar because now I am a snob.
Yeah.
But going back to the point is having square footage devoted to my food. Because if you think about how much money you spend on food, let's stop about the marijuana for a second. Think about how much you spend on food and produce. Good produce is really expensive. So
Absolutely.
if you enjoy it at all, and if you find stuff that you can grow, knowing that you know, you're saving yourself money, but B, it's so much better for you when it's grown organically, outdoors, regeneratively, however, sustainably, whatever you want to call it, whatever. But I think it's all the same kind of point, is just like growing it the way nature intended, without like the unnatural input, salt-based inputs. Yeah, so and like the food tastes better. It just like, man, it really is amazing what the food from your backyard can do for you and your kids. It's empowering. And it's also like it's a point of conversation constantly for my kids throughout the summer, and then even through the fall, because I have like a pumpkin plant that always comes up through volunteers. And you know, so I'll just let one run out and have pumpkins like into September, and so they'll be talking about them into November when we throw them back into the garden. So it's like it's a great thing. We talk about it like a dopamine high in the summertime, which is also means a crash in the wintertime. And that's why I'm working on things like when we do these late shows like this, I have this bright light and these lights and stuff, and trying to get rid of eliminate as much of that unnatural blue light, especially this time of night.
Yep.
it gets so dark here early, man. You get so bummed. So I'm trying things like a little differently, seeing if it makes a difference.
Yeah, I've heard about different like lights and stuff, like natural sunlight you can get, and somebody was talking to me about it the other day at the doctor's office. Believe it or not, they're like, you should get a sunlight," and I'm like, "Is it really going to do anything for me?" You know, I'm
Mm-mm.
skeptical. I'll be honest.
No, you should not to promote my own show on your show, but we talked to this dude, this gentleman Timothy Hammond from
Sure.
Regenerate. You know him?
Nope, I don't, but
Oh,
I'm
okay.
listening. I'm
Well,
interested.
yeah. Well, now you do, and you will soon, because if you want to talk about metaphysical, not that's maybe not the right term. That quantum biology level stuff, where a guy who can explain things so well that are so complicated, but he's one of these guys that's all about managing sunlight intake and unnatural light intake, importantly, right? Like waking up in the wintertime, especially waking up it when the sun comes up, or trying to, which is very hard to do because a lot of us work.
Right.
um, but then like, so being mindful of that, right? So then like afternoon, limiting your blue light intake or getting outside to get some actual natural sunlight, and not just getting it behind a low E window, which is actually eliminating the good UVB rays that you want, that your body needs. It's that kind of explanation. So yeah, if you ever want validity, you can go listen to that podcast or reach out to him. I'm sure he'd love to come on because he's been on a big push right now.
Definitely. Well, and I don't want to cut out you not promoting your podcast because it's part of who you are. And I'm not afraid of competition because there's no competition. We're all in this community together. So that leads me to the final question I want to ask you is, where can people connect with you? Where can they find their products? And anything else we should know about you that we might have missed?
Yeah, so our website's mibeneficials.com. There's a mailing list you can get on there, which we release like any new species of springtails. Any deals generally get released 24 hours ahead of time through the subscriber list. So you kind of get priority if you're on that. And I barely send out any emails other than when there's deals or like a new drop going on.
Sure.
So that's going to be one of the better ways to like stay updated. And then obviously on Instagram at mibeneficials, it's always a grind trying to stay up to date on that. It's just hard to put out meaningful content that feels right and it doesn't feel just like a attention grab, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and then the big one, the big way you can support us besides mibeneficials.com is our podcast that I host the podcast. I co-host it with Brian from Rubber Ducky Isopods and Kevin from OK Calyx.
Okay.
And so those two guys are amazing co-hosts. They bring a lot of really meaningful insight to we've had some amazing guests on. We're at episode. We're not 4 years in like you are, Jay, but we're at we're almost to a year of recording these things. So we're at like episode 43 right now. We're getting
That
there.
that's impressive. You know, I don't know the exact number, but I know we're between 400 and 500 interviews, which is a lot.
That's a lot of interviews, man. And I
Yes.
mean, like we were doing it on Instagram Live for about a year and a half. Just Brian and I were doing this, and honestly, it was just like a way for him and I to stay connected. Try to like, he's the guy that knows the bioactive. I'm the guy that knows the growing, and like just bouncing ideas. He helped inspire me with the springtails because I think they're just so fascinating, and I supply him with those as well.
That's
And so,
awesome.
yeah, so it turned into a podcast that's called Bioactive Live Q&A, and it's on YouTube you can find it at MI Beneficials is where you can find it, or you can just search Bioactive Live.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want us to know before we let you go today?
No, man, I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and you're a gracious host. I love your communication. I think it goes a long way, and well, looking back on a lot of your episodes, man, you've had some heavy hitting guests on, and what an opportunity. And yeah, appreciate the work that you do for this Michigan community.
Definitely. And if there's ever a guest, that you guys might want to get on your show, don't hesitate to ask me and I'll reach out to them. And if it's okay with them, I'll shoot them over your information, or they'll shoot either way, and you guys can connect and make it happen.
Sounds great, man. Really appreciate you.
No problem. So with that being said, if you can't stay lit, stay organically blunt. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Thanks for checking us out. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching Organically Blunt. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe up front. Shout out to our partners helping us grow. Seedsman Genetics, the pros you know. Country roots, soil, and grassroots too. Grow bags, get your turfs just like new. Gorilla Grow 10 kind, LEDs shining bright. Atlas Seeds, Green Wolf, keeping your grow just right. Just right. Extreme gardening and smoking storks so fly. Use code Organically Blunt and give them a try.